Pushpin disclaimer: this story is a dramatized narration intended for entertainment purposes. While it draws inspiration from real-life experiences of love, trust, and betrayal, all characters, names, and specific events are fictionalized. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised, as the story touches on sensitive themes of infidelity and emotional pain. Please remember, the goal of this content is not to encourage negativity, but to highlight human emotions, relationship struggles, and the lessons we can learn from them. It was supposed to be just another ordinary night. The kind of evening that couples in long marriages know all too well, predictable, routine, even comforting in its simplicity. After a long day at work, I came home to the faint aroma of dinner still lingering in the air. My wife had already cleared the table, leaving only 2 empty glasses on the counter. She greeted me with a small smile, one that seemed warm enough, but there was a certain tiredness in her eyes that I had begun to notice more often lately. We settled into our nightly rhythm. I flipped through channels absent-mindedly while she scrolled through her phone beside me. Occasionally, she would chuckle softly at something on the screen, though she never explained what amused her. I didn't press her. After all, marriage is built on trust, isn't it? At least that's what I kept telling myself. By 11:30 p.m., we were both getting ready for bed. I brushed my teeth. She folded the laundry we had forgotten in the dryer. Everything felt normal, quiet, still, and unremarkable. We lay down, lights off, the faint hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. Just as I began drifting into that half-asleep state, the sudden vibration of a phone broke the calm. Her phone. I squinted at the glowing screen. It was exactly midnight when the call came. My wife's body stiffened instantly. She grabbed the phone off the nightstand so quickly, it startled me. Without a word, she slipped out of bed and padded softly toward the living room. Something about the way she moved made my chest tighten. There was urgency in her steps, a nervous energy that didn't belong in the middle of the night. I strained my ears and caught the faintest whispering. Her voice, soft, careful, almost trembling. At first, I told myself it might be something innocent, a family emergency, a relative who needed help. But then again, why whisper? Why step out of the room like she had something to hide? I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Seconds felt like minutes, and minutes stretched into what seemed like an eternity. When she finally returned, she wore a look of forced calm, as though nothing unusual had happened. She slipped back under the covers, turned her back to me, and pretended to sleep. But I couldn't close my eyes. Not after that. That midnight call planted a seed of doubt deep inside me. A seed I didn't want, one I prayed I could ignore. Yet, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the thought that something was terribly, terribly wrong. And that was the moment. The exact moment. Our normal evening became the beginning of something that would shatter me forever. The sound of that midnight call didn't just disturb the silence of the room. It disturbed the silence of my heart. As she slipped away into the living room, I couldn't help but listen harder. Every creak of the wooden floor seemed louder, every whisper echoing in my ears, even though I could barely make out the words. Her voice was soft, hurried, as if she was afraid of being overheard. That detail alone unsettled me more than anything else. I shifted in bed, torn between the urge to get up and the fear of what I might discover if I did. There's a strange comfort in ignorance, and for a brief moment, I almost convinced myself to stay put and close my eyes. But curiosity has a cruel way of gnawing at you when you least expect it. So I sat up, my heart thudding in my chest, and tiptoed to the bedroom door. From the crack, I could see her figure outlined by the dim light from her phone screen. She had her back to me, one hand pressed against her forehead as though the conversation was weighing heavily on her. "I can't talk right now, he's here," she whispered urgently. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. He's here. Who was he? And why did she sound so desperate to hide it? My stomach turned cold as possibilities raced through my head. Could it be a family matter? A friend in trouble? Or was it worse? I wanted to storm into the room and demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was the faint hope that I was misunderstanding everything. I backed away quietly, returning to bed just before she walked in. She slipped her phone under her pillow and avoided looking at me as she lay down. Her breathing was steady, almost too steady, as if she was pretending to sleep. I stared at the ceiling, fighting the war in my head. Logic told me not to jump to conclusions. But the heart doesn't deal with logic, it deals with feelings, and mine screamed that something was off. Why would she hide a call at midnight? Why whisper? Why the guilty urgency in her voice? Minutes turned into hours as I lay awake, the faint hum of the fan doing nothing to quiet the storm inside me. When morning came, she acted as though nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, asked me about my day ahead, and smiled with a calmness that only deepened my suspicion. That midnight call wasn't just a phone call. It was the sound of a crack forming in the foundation of our marriage. I didn't know it then, but that single vibration on the nightstand would unravel everything I thought I knew about the woman beside me. And so, while she carried on as if life was perfectly normal, I found myself haunted by a single burning question. Who was on the other end of that call? The days that followed were ordinary on the surface, but inside me, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every small action of hers became magnified, every word analyzed, every glance re-examined through the lens of that midnight call. Doubt, once planted, grows fast, like a weed overtaking a garden, and I could feel it twisting inside my chest. I began noticing things I had overlooked before. The way she suddenly guarded her phone, keeping it face down on the table, sometimes even carrying it into the bathroom. The late-night smiles at her screen that she brushed off as just a funny post from a friend. The vague answers when I asked where she'd been or who she'd spoken to. These weren't new behaviors, but they felt heavier now, suspicious in ways they hadn't before. My mind kept replaying her words from that night. I can't talk right now, he's here. Who was he? The thought replayed like a broken record. The ambiguity of it tortured me, because my imagination filled in the blanks with endless scenarios. Maybe it was someone from work, a colleague she had grown too close to. Maybe an old flame who had somehow reappeared. Or maybe someone I didn't even know existed. What hurt the most was the change I began to see in her eyes. She was present, yes. Physically there, cooking meals, making small talk, lying beside me at night. But there was a distance, a space between us that I couldn't bridge, no matter how hard I tried. It was like she had built an invisible wall, and behind it, she was living a life I wasn't part of. I remembered the times when we used to laugh together at silly TV shows, when she'd tell me about her day in detail, when she'd reach for my hand in the middle of a grocery store aisle just because. Now, those moments felt like distant memories. Her laughter was quieter, her conversations shorter, and her touch almost absent. One evening, while she showered, I stared at her phone lying on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I reached toward it. I stopped myself just inches away. I couldn't do it, not yet. Snooping through her phone felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready for. I wanted to believe I could still trust her, that I was overthinking. But the temptation gnawed at me. That was the cruelest part of suspicion. It didn't just make me question her, it made me question myself. Was I paranoid? Was I losing my grip? Or was my heart trying to protect me from a truth my mind didn't want to face? Every time she smiled at me, I wondered if it was real. Every time she said, "I love you," I wondered if she meant it. And every time her phone buzzed, I felt the ground beneath me shift just a little more. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and with each passing day, they grew deeper roots inside me. By this point, I knew pretending everything was fine would only eat me alive. I couldn't confront her yet. Not without proof, not without certainty. Confronting her too soon could give her the chance to hide things even better. So I made a choice that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. I would quietly investigate, silently collect the truth she was keeping from me. At first, it was subtle. I paid closer attention to her routine. When she said she was going to the store, I noted how long she stayed out. When she claimed she was tired and headed to bed early, I watched her out of the corner of my eye, noticing how she scrolled endlessly through her phone under the blanket, the light illuminating her face in the dark. Every small detail became a clue, every minute accounted for. I started waking up earlier than her, just to check if there were late-night messages still glowing on her screen. But her phone was always locked. She had recently changed her password too, something she hadn't done in years. That single action, though simple, cut me deeply. A shared life meant shared trust, or at least it used to. One evening, I decided to test her. Casually, I mentioned a colleague of mine whose wife had been unfaithful, and how he discovered it through secret phone calls. I watched her reaction carefully. She froze for just a second, then forced a laugh and said, "People are ridiculous. Who has the energy for that kind of drama?" Her words sounded light, but her eyes told a different story. They darted away from mine too quickly, as if afraid to linger. I began noticing patterns. Her phone always seemed to ring or buzz when I wasn't in the room. If I walked in unexpectedly, she would quickly slide the phone into her pocket or flip the screen over. She also started volunteering to run errands more often, even for things as small as buying bread or milk. Errands she used to ask me to handle. The hardest part was pretending not to notice. I acted like the same husband I'd always been, smiling at dinner, asking about her day, hugging her goodnight. But inside, I was unraveling. Every fake smile I gave her was a shield. Every nod and "I love you too," a mask. Behind it all, my mind worked like a detective, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. There were moments when guilt struck me, when I wondered if I was the one destroying us by doubting her so deeply. But then I'd hear her whispering again in the kitchen, or see her fingers typing furiously on the screen late into the night, and the guilt would vanish, replaced by cold suspicion. My silent investigation wasn't about catching her. It was about protecting myself from the devastating possibility that the woman I loved most was no longer truly mine. And though I hadn't uncovered the full truth yet, deep down, I already knew. Something was hiding in the shadows of our marriage, and sooner or later, it would come to light. Suspicion can be endured for only so long before it turns into something unbearable. For weeks, I had lived with the tension of pretending everything was fine while secretly watching every move she made. But the night came when the weight of it all pressed down so hard that I could no longer keep quiet. That night became the breaking point, the moment where silence gave way to confrontation. It started like so many other evenings. Dinner was quiet, almost mechanical. We barely exchanged words, her eyes glued to her phone more than to me. By now, I knew the signs. She was waiting for something, or rather, someone. I tried to act natural, sipping my drink, watching her fingers tap out quick messages. But my chest burned with questions. Who was she writing to? Why did her face light up for them in a way it hadn't for me in months? Later, as we lay in bed, the familiar glow of her screen appeared again. I pretended to sleep, breathing slowly, keeping my eyes shut just enough to watch her. Her lips curved into a faint smile at something she read. Then, almost like clockwork, the phone buzzed again. Midnight. That was it. My patience cracked. I sat up suddenly, startling her. "Who keeps calling you at this hour?" My voice was calm at first, though inside me, a storm raged. She jumped, her face pale in the light of the phone. "No one. Just a friend." "A friend who calls at midnight? A friend you need to whisper to in another room?" My tone sharpened, the anger I'd been burying for weeks finally slipping free. She stammered, clutching her phone tightly. "You're overthinking. It's nothing serious." But I had watched her too closely, too long to accept that. "Don't lie to me," I said firmly, my eyes locked on hers. "I hear you whispering. I see the way you hide your phone from me. Just tell me the truth." Her defense turned into aggression. "Why are you spying on me? Do you not trust me anymore?" She raised her voice, trying to shift the blame, but I didn't let her words cut me down. This wasn't about trust, it was about proof. The argument spiraled quickly. For the first time in years, we weren't two partners working through a problem. We were enemies, standing on opposite sides of a battlefield built from suspicion and silence. My heart ached as I looked at her. The woman I had promised to love forever, now someone I could barely recognize. That night, she didn't admit anything. She denied, deflected, and stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with my fury and heartbreak. But even in her denial, I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of fear, the shadow of guilt she couldn't quite hide. I knew then, without a doubt, that my worst fears weren't just suspicions anymore. They were real. And though she hadn't confessed yet, that midnight confrontation marked the breaking point. There was no going back to the way things used to be. The confrontation should have ended the guessing game, but instead, it left me even more desperate for answers. Her denial lingered in the air like smoke after a fire, choking me with doubt. I knew she was hiding something, and the weight of not knowing felt heavier than the truth itself could ever be. I had reached the point where I needed proof, something undeniable, something she couldn't explain away. That proof came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday evening when I got home earlier than usual. She hadn't realized I was back. Her car was in the driveway, but the house was unusually quiet. As I stepped inside, I heard her voice, soft, tender, warmer than I had heard it in months. She was in the kitchen, speaking on the phone. My chest tightened as I caught the words, "I miss you too. I wish we could be together more often." The world seemed to stop. My ears rang, my heart pounded, and for a moment, I couldn't move. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confession, plain as day, and it shattered me. I stepped back quietly before she could see me, retreating to the hallway like a wounded soldier retreating from battle. My hands shook uncontrollably. Part of me wanted to barge in, grab the phone, and demand to know who was on the other end. But another part, the part that still clung to some form of dignity, wanted to hear it all before confronting her again. Later that night, when she was in the shower, I finally crossed the line I had resisted for weeks. Her phone was on the dresser, screen glowing faintly. My hands trembled as I picked it up and unlocked it, only to realize she had never changed her password after all. The code was the same, as if she hadn't cared whether I looked or not. Maybe she believed I never would. The messages were right there, dozens of them. Sweet words, longing words, the kind of messages that used to belong to us but now belong to someone else. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing. I'll find an excuse to see you again soon." Every sentence cut into me like a blade. And then came the final blow. I saw the name. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some faceless man I had never heard of. It was someone close. A coworker I had met. Someone she had introduced as just a friend. I felt sick. Betrayal wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was a fact, etched in glowing letters on her phone screen. By the time she stepped out of the shower, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, tears burning in my eyes. She froze when she saw me, and in that moment, the truth was undeniable. Her face said everything the words in her phone had already confirmed. I had found the proof I dreaded. The shocking truth was no longer hiding. It was right in front of me, and it broke me in ways I never thought possible. When she stepped out of the shower and saw me holding her phone, time seemed to stop. Her towel clung to her shoulders, her hair dripping water onto the floor, but it was her face that told the whole story. Shock, guilt, fear. She didn't need to say a single word. I already knew everything. I held up the phone, my voice breaking. "How long has this been going on?" She froze, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Her silence was an answer in itself. My chest tightened, my throat dry, yet I pushed again, louder this time. "How long?" Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." The room spun around me. I had expected lies, denials, another round of excuses. But hearing her admit even a fraction of the truth was like a dagger twisting in my chest. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages again, shoving the phone toward her. "You said you loved him. You said last night was amazing. How could you do this to us? To me?" Her eyes welled up with tears as she sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. "I was lonely. I felt invisible. You don't look at me the way you used to." Her words pierced me, but they didn't excuse the betrayal. "So you replaced me? With him?" My voice cracked, torn between rage and devastation. The argument exploded like a storm. She sobbed. I shouted. She tried to explain. I refused to hear it. Years of love, trust, and marriage were collapsing in front of us, reduced to shattered glass that no one could piece back together. Every memory we had built, our wedding day, the laughter, the late-night talks, all of it flashed through my mind, tainted now by the betrayal I could never erase. At one point, she reached for me, her voice trembling. "Please, I still love you." I pulled back, shaking my head. "No, you loved him. You chose him." The words left my mouth like stones, heavy and final. The silence that followed was unbearable. We sat on opposite ends of the bed, oceans apart despite being just a few feet away. My tears blurred the room as I realized that no matter what she said, nothing would undo what I had seen. By the time dawn broke through the curtains, our marriage felt like it had already ended. There was no trust left, no foundation to stand on. The confrontation hadn't given me closure. It had only deepened the wound. And as she quietly gathered her things that morning, avoiding my eyes, I understood that this wasn't just the end of an argument. It was the collapse of everything we had once been. When the dust finally settled, I found myself standing in the ruins of a life I thought was unshakable. Our home was the same. Same walls, same furniture, same photos hanging on the walls, but everything felt hollow, stripped of the warmth it once carried. She was gone, not physically at first, but emotionally. And when she finally walked out with her bags in hand, silence filled the spaces where her laughter used to live. At first, I was consumed by anger. Anger at her for betraying me. Anger at him for stepping into our lives. Anger at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. It's a strange thing, how betrayal makes you question not just the person who hurt you, but your own worth as well. I asked myself endless questions. Was I not enough? Did I fail her somehow? Could I have prevented this? The search for answers felt endless, but none of them could fix what had already been broken. But as the weeks passed, the raw wound began to scar over, and I started to see things differently. Pain has a way of teaching lessons that comfort never can. I realized that trust is fragile. It takes years to build, but a single midnight call can destroy it. Love, as powerful as it is, cannot survive without honesty. And perhaps the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the people we give our everything to are the very ones who will take it all away. Yet, in the midst of heartbreak, I also found clarity. I learned that my value wasn't determined by her choices. Her betrayal wasn't a reflection of my shortcomings, but of her own. I had loved faithfully, given my all, and stood by her side. That is who I was, and that was something no act of infidelity could erase. Slowly, I began piecing myself back together. I leaned on friends, family, and quiet moments of reflection. I filled the silence with things that brought me peace. Long walks, journaling, late-night drives with music loud enough to drown out the memories. Healing didn't happen overnight, but little by little, I felt the weight lift. Most of all, I learned that endings are not just about loss, they are about beginnings too. Yes, the marriage collapsed, but in its place came a chance to rebuild my life, stronger and wiser. The midnight call that once shattered me became the very thing that pushed me toward rediscovering myself. So now, when I look back, I don't just see betrayal. I see lessons etched in pain. I see a man who survived heartbreak, who refused to be defined by someone else's choices. And while I may carry the scars forever, those scars are proof that I endured, that I overcame, and that someday I will love again. This time with clearer eyes and a stronger heart. Because sometimes the most painful endings lead us to the most powerful beginnings. 48.